Alright, everybody. My name is Altinic, and I've been getting some requests to go over some clothing sculpting and things like that. So I thought that maybe I would also go over the way that I have created jewelry and necklaces and stuff like that as well. Um, so I thought that I have a little corset here and a pair of heels, so I can kind of show you shoes and corsets. And then I'll go over some curves and array modifiers that you can use to kind of quickly create jewelry without manually placing each chain link individually, right? So hopefully pretty cool, pretty useful. And I guess we will just go ahead and get started. Um, so we start with this top. I have this corset here. I got this from um, closet.com. It's a website where people create things using like Marvelous Designer, and usually you can get like FBX models for pretty cool like actual designed clothing. So this was something that was just up there for free. I've actually already added this to my mod, but this isn't too hard to sculpt, so I thought that it would be a good little test piece. So so this I haven't done anything to it yet. I haven't made any changes to the scale or anything like that. So it kind of conveniently comes in already almost the size of Jodi, but what usually I do first is sort of find a point to like anchor the piece to her body, right? So for a top like this, usually um, I'll usually kind of try to either line it up with her back or more with her chest. So probably with something like this, usually I would maybe put it um, kind of in a way sort of on her chest, if that makes sense. So let's see, maybe almost something like right there, and then line it up just a little bit. And pretty much what you want to do here is just kind of get like a rough scale, just using like basic transforms. So like I might make this slightly wider, so it goes a little bit around the body, a little bit better. Now you can see it's still poking through, that's fine. We're not really concerned about that right now. We just want to get like a general shape that is kind of like generally the size of her body. Like even right now, even though it's clipping inside a little bit, that's honestly fine because we're about to fix that in like 5 seconds, right? So I think this is actually a pretty good place to start. It's not perfect. Maybe we can actually bring this down a little bit more so we can see kind of the curve here. I just try to line that up. You actually want like a little bit of space here because in game, whenever physics are applied and weight painting is applied and stuff like that, this is going to not fit like perfectly like what you're seeing here. It's gonna probably sag a little bit. It's gonna move around when Jodi walks and stuff. So um, it's not gonna be perfect, but that's why you want a little bit of space here because once her chest will sag a little bit and things might clip. So you want some space, sort of in this underside pocket here where her abdomen is connecting to her breasts. Um, but this should be pretty good. This should give us a good starting point. So I might actually even just line this up a little bit more like with the center of the body there. And I think now this is pretty good. This is a pretty good place. So at this point, we can go into sculpt mode. Now, I am by no means an expert at this. This is not like the way to sculpt clothes. I would probably still consider myself like honestly, like a beginner at this. Maybe intermediate, but honestly, I don't know if I would even call myself that. So this is just like knowledge that I've learned from like other people in Discord that have helped me, and just from like practice, just doing lots and lots of different pieces, for arms, for hands, for legs, and for feet. So you're kind of covering all these different weird little sculpting issues that you might encounter, or finding little tricks and stuff. So, like I said, this is not like, it's always good to reference more than one resource, but this is a flow that has worked for me. Um, so we're in sculpt mode now, and this elastic grab brush here, this one, this is pretty much like the main brush. Usually I don't have to use any other brush except for this one. Very occasionally, maybe like sculpting pants and stuff like that, because um, that can be really tricky. You might end up using something like the smooth brush if you start to sculpt a little bit too close, and you start like pinching the mesh. If you like zoom in really far and you pull like one specific little spot out, you'll get these little bumps and uneven points. So you might use the smooth, but for the most part, I pretty much entirely use just this grab brush. And so the first thing that we want to do, right, so we have like a sort of general scale, but we want to start to get it to actually fit her. So what we need to do, I guess, to start with this grab brush, the settings, usually I don't change the settings too much during the sculpt process either. I kind of just sit with this range. Usually brush is around 500 and the strength is around 500. I think strength 0.5 is like the default when you're in sculpt, and then I just increase the brush size significantly. Um, because it actually kind of makes it a little bit easier to work with, and I'll show you kind of how that works. So we have a huge brush right now, and what we want to do is kind of get this a little bit more, we want to make it a little bit wider but more even. So what I usually do is I'll kind of zoom out kind of far like this, and I'll just kind of start to pull on the left and right sides of this, and it's not going to look like it's doing anything right now, but when we do this a couple more times, you're going to see that now the sides are starting to come back. And the reason we're doing this from so far away is because, like I said, if you zoom in really far and you start automatically trying to like pull it out, you're going to get these really, really uneven stretched out pulls. So if you pull from really far away, you're basically grabbing the whole corset at once, but you're still grabbing only the sides. And you can see this little yellow dot. This is actually grabbing like individual vertices on the mesh. So that's why I'm also grabbing from the sides, even though you're essentially grabbing the whole mesh in this radius, right? So that's kind of important. So we've kind of got the sides stretched out a little bit, so that's good. Now I'm gonna kind of, it looks like it's kind of already fitting her back pretty well. We can fine tune that a little bit later. That's not bad. Like I said, this mesh is kind of nice because it already kind of fits her body shape. So at this point we can kind of zoom in a little bit, not too far yet, maybe somewhere around here. Notice like the radius of the brush is kind of like it's like a little bit bigger than like the size of her, like in her full chest here. And this is also just a similar thing. We kind of want to pull, on this upper area, but we don't want to like pinch. So we want to grab a little bit more of this at one time. So we can kind of move this out a little bit. I also try not to, like, even though you're pulling from a large radius here, it's always good to not just grab one vertex and just pull on it. It's usually good to maybe like grab one little bit, move your mouse, grab like other little parts, make sure that maybe you're also kind of pulling over here on like these sections, and you're getting like an even flow of the vertex, and then that way you're not just grabbing one and you're like pinching it really hard or stretching one specific area of the shirt very far. So it's always good to kind of grab multiple ones. So you're going to probably get to this point, and then you're going to be like, you know, what's the best way to do this, right? Because you've got this little small point. So usually in this instance, what I would do is so I don't change the brush size, right? We're not going to make the brush smaller. The idea is to kind of zoom in and zoom out depending on how much influence you want the sculpt to have. So at this point, I'm just going to zoom in further, and kind of like how I showed you before where we had the brush about the size of her chest, now we're just going to kind of do the same idea, but it's going to be like the circumference of like her nipple. And so we'll just zoom in. And sometimes you want to zoom in really far. Sometimes you actually want it to be a little bit smaller. And then I'll just start pulling on these different ones here. And like I said, you kind of, sometimes I'll sort of go in like a circle and just pull it out. And notice I'm just making tiny little adjustments, just making sure that this is kind of like staying even. Like I said, you don't, you know, some people might be like, why does it matter? Because this is going to be like a pointed area anyway, but you don't want it to turn into like a triangle. You want it to keep like a smooth, round shape, right? So that's kind of the idea here, and that's why you know, you could maybe pull on one and pull it all the way out, but you'll probably get something that looks a little bit better if you just kind of gently pull on a big group of them. So this is turning out pretty good. You can see that it's keeping like a smooth shape. It's we can zoom out a little bit. Give it. Also, you don't want things to be like extremely skin tight, because what'll happen is like when you weight paint and you get in game, um, her body will just kind of clip through during like animation, so you do want like a little bit of breathing room between her mesh and like your clothing. But as you can see now, we have a pretty good sculpt. It's pretty even. I mean, a corset like this might not actually bend like that, but just as an example of how you might sculpt that region. One thing I probably just did a little bit wrong actually as I'm showing you this is that sometimes it's also better to activate this X, it's like the symmetry tool. So I'll go back, we'll just undo what we just did. I don't know how far it'll let me go because we just did a lot of stuff. Okay, that's fine. I can show you maybe with like her back here. So this is gonna do what this X does. It creates like a symmetry, and now if you look, you can see I have two yellow dots that are moving around as I move along the mesh. So this is really good for pieces like this, where it's very even on each side, and you don't have to sculpt this side and then sculpt this side. You can turn on the symmetry tool, and then you can make sure you're working both evenly. So let's say, you know, right here, you can see that this is kind of curving around inside of the body, and we've got a little bit of gapping down here. So what we can do is I'll kind of zoom out, maybe around here or here, and I'll just kind of bring this in. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of moments where you're going to be sculpting like this, especially where you're still working the mesh, and you're going to see it's going to phase inside of her body like this. And this is okay. Do not be like alarmed. You're not doing anything wrong. This is part of the process. And a lot of times it's actually a little bit easier to get a better fit on her body whenever the mesh is actually clipping inside, because then what you can do is you can just kind of pull it back out to the surface, following like the curves of the body, versus I guess just sort of making it really large, or trying to bring something that's really large and then bring it down to the surface of her body, like up here. Sometimes this can be a little bit trickier when you're trying to close this gap, versus if it's kind of already inside the body and you can just sort of bring it back out to the surface, right? This is a little bit easier to maintain like the shape and the curve. So just a little note. So I'll just kind of keep going here. just bring some of these parts out that are clipping. Notice that I'm not going like super deep, and we're not making really large strong pulls in any like particular direction. We just want to slightly nudge different areas of the mesh out to the surface. We don't want to grab, you don't want to zoom in like right here and then just like pull this out. You're just going to spend more time, and then what's going to happen is you're going to have this part's a little bit further, and then this part's a little bit like more in, and then it's going to get like real wavy and uneven. So it kind of helps to still like keep your distance like this and just slowly close in over time. Like right now, yeah, we're still kind of rough sculpting. This is still kind of like a drafting phase. And then we'll go in a little bit more. We can still maybe pull this out. And we just kind of, sometimes I'll do this part of the process like multiple times where I'm kind of bringing it in a little bit like this, bringing it in, and then you'll see it's clipping through again, and then we'll just bring that back out. And pretty much what you're doing, it's essentially the same idea as like what we did in the very beginning when I stretched like on each of these sides from far away. It's pretty much the same idea. You're kind of, instead of like zooming in really far and trying to mold it, you're kind of slowly shaping it by like making these small like push and pull adjustments over a wide area versus trying to like sculpt at the micro level. Um, so it will help you a lot. So we've already got like a pretty good fit here. You can see it's already starting to look like it is designed to fit her, right? We've got a couple little spots here, so what we can do, you don't want to zoom in too far, right? We don't want to like zoom in right here and try to like pull on that, because see what's going to happen, you're going to get this, and then you're going to try to fix these little waves, and you're going to give yourself a headache. So just zoom out kind of far, and then we can just bring that whole piece in. And it's going to clip a little bit, but that's okay, because now we're just going to bring it. Then you can zoom in a little bit more, and then we can just correct the pieces that have clipped inside, and you'll get a much better, more even, smoother sculpt. And you can use things like proportional editing or things like that as well if you need to. It's definitely not incorrect. It's really just kind of a matter of maybe your workflow or what kind of mesh you're actually trying to design or work with. It might just kind of depend. So see here, and when we do stuff like that, we're making these corrections. It's going to continue to probably, it's going to bring this bottom part out a little bit, but the idea is to just bring it out. Then we're going to close it back in again, bring it back in. And what's pretty much going to happen is just over time, you're going to see less and less of this clipping into the body, and it's going to start to look like it is basically designed to fit her. And see, like on this area here, we're just going to, even though I'm seeing clipping like right in that center point, I'm not always grabbing directly in the center there. Sometimes I'm also grabbing spots around this point and bringing those out. And like I said, and that's just to keep your sculpt even and clean, so you're not getting uneven bumps and ridges. And now you can see that we've brought it in. It looks like it's starting to fit like the curvature of her body, and it's also now it's starting to kind of sit more flat against her abdomen, which is good. So this is still a little bit uneven. So now we've got the sides here. We can do that. We can keep our symmetry tool on. Like I said, for the most part, especially with designs like this, you might actually be working with symmetry on like almost the entire time. That might change, like I said, just depends on what you're working with. This specific item works really well for that, but there are other things that might be asymmetrical, and you can't really sculpt them with this tool that way, or not entirely. You might be able to do certain parts with symmetry and others without it. So for these sides, same kind of thing like we did earlier. I don't want to grab the specific points on the side. I want to zoom out a little bit. We can keep symmetry on, and we can just kind of squeeze the whole mesh together a little bit. And we're just going to bring it in. And you're going to be like, damn, now I got to resculpt it again. Yes, you kind of do. That's just kind of the nature of this workflow. You're going to get better results by doing it this way, at least from my experience. It might feel like you're breaking your mesh, or it might feel like you're kind of going over your work multiple times, but really what you're doing is like I said, you're just trying to keep the mesh from distorting while you're also making it fit her, and this is part of that process. So now once we've got it closed in a little bit more, now we can see as we keep working it, keep pulling. And the sculpt brush is going to go based on the angle of your camera, right? So if I want the mesh to kind of come around this little pocket, this other like small curve right here, because it's kind of a weird angle, right? So you kind of want to look in this direction and then pull the mesh from this angle. So that way you're also you're shaping it around this right here, and not maybe from her like straight on from her back like this. You kind of want it to follow that angle there and kind of sculpt in that angle. And now you can see it's not perfect yet, but that's still the idea. Now we can maybe zoom in a little bit more now that we don't have to make such a large adjustment to bring it in. It's already a little bit closer, so we can zoom in a little bit more and just do a little bit more fine adjustments and just bring specific areas in a little bit. And now clipped back in, but that's okay. Just keep slowly working this, and then we can pull over here. And always just remember, you just don't want to grab one point and pull it. You want to grab multiple points, and you want to follow the curvature of her body. So it's always good to pull a little bit here and then do a little circle around, then maybe follow this up here, follow this curve, and pull from down here and work your way up. And then you might have to rotate the camera a little bit, then pull on this side. Then maybe we need to fix this part, so now we're going to rotate this way. And we're just going to make little pulls. Sometimes you even want to pull maybe down here. And sometimes you can even pull to like the left or the right to get different effects. Sometimes you're not always maybe pulling from, maybe you're not pulling directly from this angle, but maybe sometimes you're pulling from like straight on like this, and you're pulling out that way. It really just depends. It just depends on the kind of mesh that you're working with, that kind of thing. So we're just going to keep doing this. Hopefully YouTube doesn't throw a fit about me sculpting this part of the body, but you can think whatever you want, but it's for education, it's for science. but for real though, yeah, no, you will definitely learn a lot about sculpting just from doing little things like this. And in reality, sometimes these parts of the body are actually kind of difficult to sculpt around, especially like if you're making pants and stuff. Like sculpting between thighs is kind of difficult. Sometimes it can be hard to get it like you can use things like masking, but sometimes if you maybe mask down the middle of the pan, you might pull on one side a little bit more, and then you'll actually get more distortion on the mesh because one area was masked and didn't move at all, and you sort of get this really weird, like, stretched, distorted effect. Um, so from what I've noticed is that it does seem like for the most part it will work better to kind of just do what we're doing here, where you're sort of sculpting the whole mesh at one time. You're not masking anything really, but you're just making multiple passes sometimes over like the same area and just slowly working the mesh. You don't really want to concentrate on like one specific vertex unless you're doing something really small like what we're doing here, where you're trying to make sure like maybe this part is actually molded and not just completely round or something. So like this would be an instance, or if you were doing or like once you're a little bit closer to the end of the sculpt and maybe you're at like just those polish touches and you just want this to maybe sit a little bit closer, and this is where you just do the same thing. You're just going to zoom in a little bit further, make small nudges. You don't want to just grab this point and pull the whole thing in. You want to kind of make small adjustments up this curve, and you'll go up one time and then you go back down and make another pass down here. You're just going to bring it in along the curve, go back down, bring it in again. And this is just going to make sure that you're keeping the accurate shape, and you're not just pulling on one area. There we go, now we're getting a good fit. And that's a good way to kind of do something like that if we were at the very end of this, right? Okay. So I think that's a pretty good demo for the shirt. The same kind of ideas are just going to continue to apply, and you can just sort of keep doing your thing, fit it until it looks like it fits her pretty well. I think this is already like pretty close. Of course, this area would still definitely need some work. You'd want to close this in maybe a little bit, or reshape it. Sometimes you might need to clean this up, so maybe we have to pull that down, and we pull this up, maybe straighten the belt a little bit, something like that. Maybe these straps got a little wonky, and so you gotta maybe correct those a little bit, or sometimes you gotta zoom in a little bit here, straighten out these straps or something. So that's just something that'll happen, and you shouldn't really have that much of an issue with something like that if you're kind of following this method for the most part. When you're first starting out, you might have that experience, but over time, you'll get a pretty good feel for how far you should be zoomed in and out. So let's do these shoes. So this is just another good example. These are just slightly different, but pretty much the same. So usually what I do is I'll just start with one shoe. So this model here that I have is it comes with one shoe, but if you had something where it was two shoes, I would just go into edit mode, separate one of them, and then we'll just work on one foot. So the same kind of idea applies here. These are some like open heels. So the way that I usually like to do these, depending on the shoe you're working on, there's kind of two good anchor points for these kinds of shoes. And usually it's going to be like the end of her toes, or it's going to be the back of her heel. I think for the most part, whenever I'm doing heels, I usually will, I want to say for these ones, whenever I made these, I think I actually may have anchored them like to the toe. So what we're going to do, same kind of idea, we're going to just start to get a rough shape of her foot. It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. We're going to make that a little bit wider. And then this should be a little bit taller. The heel is not going to be perfect yet. We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for silhouette. So we're getting close. This one might work a little bit better if we try to line the heel up. So let's try that instead. So I want kind of you can see where like her heel is kind of supposed to sit in this shoe. So that's where I'm going to kind of try to line that up visually. And we're going to try to, yeah, we're gonna anchor it around that part where it would where her heel would sit against the back there. And it's okay if it clips through, right? We're trying to make it fit, like it's coming through the sides there. We can make it a little bit wider. We actually might even need to rotate this shoe slightly. It looks like it's kind of at a very straight angle, and her foot is kind of twisting outward slightly. So yeah, maybe in this instance you also rotate it a little bit as needed, or maybe not. We might not need to. I might have rotated it a little bit too much, but sometimes you can. But for this, we're pretty close. And sometimes, sometimes some of these are a little bit trickier than others, but usually, as long as it looks like you've kind of maintained the general shape of the shoe, and we've got it kind of looking like it's sitting against the back of her foot now. So I think this is actually a pretty good place to start sculpting. And we're just going to keep this active. We're going to go into sculpt mode, and we're just going to start moving things around a little bit. So for this particular, for this kind of thing, we probably do want to be maybe a little bit more aggressive with the sculpting, but I'm still not going to go super zoomed in and try to pull this whole shoe to the right. We kind of want to, maybe I want to keep this ankle, right? This is still kind of lined up with her ankle, but this is definitely a little out of line. So I might not zoom out too far, but I might go a little bit further in so I can just kind of grab like this bottom area of the shoe. And sometimes you're going to kind of pull a little bit this way, and you're going to nudge that back, and you're going to pull this way, and you're going to kind of bring that back in. And there we go. We've already got a pretty nice little correction there. And now we can maybe keep even this same distance, and we're going to go from this side and start to bring this heel in. Make sure you're not just pulling on the inner there, or on the back there, but also on these straps on the front. And look at that, that's already looking pretty good. We can keep this out, now we can get it so it looks like it's wrapping around the ankle. And we're already getting the pretty general shape silhouette of her foot. And so we got it a little bit out of place, and I see now we can, so with these, you do kind of have to be careful with this actual heel. Now I can show you how to kind of correct that shape, because we're probably going to have to right after I do this, but we're going to kind of pull these shoes back a little bit. We're going to pull them down. We're going to start to, I'm going to align this with her toes. I have this plane here. This is sort of supposed to be like a floor, but we're going to pull these down, because eventually we'll bring this piece up, and this will be our reference for an actual floor. It's a good way to figure out how long the heel should be and how long your platform is, depending on whatever kind of shoe you're working on. So we're getting somewhere with this. And now this is where you might start to zoom in a little bit, and we're going to maybe correct just this back part of the heel. We're going to maybe sculpt this around the back a little bit better. We're going to pull this out some. Pull this out some. And remember, you don't want to just grab one part. You want to maybe rotate around it, grab there, then go back, grab here, grab there, You don't just want to grab one spot, you want to grab multiple places. And then now maybe we zoom in a little bit more here. We're going to go from the top and we're going to bring this part in. Try to hug the heel or hug the ankle a little bit more. And you can see it didn't clip as bad this time, so we're just going to make another little correction. Zoomed in a little bit more so I can just maybe touch this part without touching this top part that we just moved in as much. It's going to still move it a little bit, but it's not going to move it as much as if we were zoomed out further. And we're just controlling. We're using the same size brush, same size strength as the corset, but we're just controlling the influence of the sculpt based on how far we're zoomed in. So, getting pretty close there. Now I'm just kind of roughly shaping this. We can maybe pull up, we can pull down on the platform a little bit. Now we can move that back up. And you'll see that happen sometimes too. You know, you're going to pull down here, and then this part might start to curve. So you might pull down on this side, and then you might maybe grab this middle point of this line here. Maybe you grab this middle point, and we start to kind of bring this back up. And now we can align it with sort of like the bottom of her toes. We'll bring the platform out a little bit. We're going to start to maybe shape the platform to the to like her sort of toe splay. Maybe we pull this out some. And this isn't perfect, right? Not going for perfection right now. I'm just also trying to do this a little bit quickly. So I can sort of show you the idea. But this isn't too far off from how I might approach this. It's just that for the video, I'm not taking my time as much as I might normally. So, you know, if I were doing this for an actual project, I've already made these heels for the game. But if I were doing this for like an actual, if this was going to be something I was going to add to the game, then I would probably be a little bit more like cautious about what I'm doing. But right now I just want to kind of show you how to get this sort of generally shaped to her. And just notice, like if you're just paying attention and just kind of noticing how I'm kind of going in and out of different zoom levels, changing different parts. We're just going to slowly just kind of keep working. All these little points that I'm seeing are starting to clip. And then maybe this part's out a little bit too far, so we're just going to bring that back in so it's a little bit, you know, we want things to look like they're designed for her, right? Not just kind of made to fit her. So that's going to separate something that, like I said, looks like it was made for her versus something that was just kind of roughly shaped to fit. So we're already getting pretty close. You can see this is turning out pretty clean. Maybe we see some of it starting to clip through there, so we just are going to zoom out a little bit. I accidentally pulled on that angle. And we're just going to start to pull that down so that they're not clipping inside. Then maybe we zoom in a little bit further and we pull these straps back up so they're not clipping through the feet. And like I said, you know, you might have to do this kind of thing multiple times. You might have to pull the straps up and then pull this back down, and then you might have to pull the straps back up again, and then you might have to pull it back down again. That's just kind of the flow. It's just kind of how this process kind of goes. So, but now you can see it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Now you're not getting any clipping. Obviously she's wearing some rings and the studs are coming through, but if those weren't there, you can tell that this is fitting pretty well and not really clipping. So there you go. So now we got a pretty good wrap. And then at this point, this is really where you would just start to fine-tune things. You might zoom in a little bit. You might even fix some of these little curves on these straps. Maybe you pull this side out. move this part back in, move that out, and you're just going to kind of, because her angle is going to be, it's not a perfect cylinder, right? It's not a perfect circle, so you might have to kind of zoom in because this part is almost like a little bit straighter. It's almost like a egg shape, kind of. You've got these kind of straighter lines here, and then a wider circular curve here. So this is something where maybe, you know, you're going in and you're pulling this in a little bit at a sharper angle, but you're kind of keeping this more of like a gentle circle curve. So, and same kind of thing here. You can see that this is, you know, starting to move a little bit far out from the body, so we just move that in, pull that out. It's going to separate a little bit again, and we're just going to keep nudging that inward, make sure that this is outward, and we're getting a pretty decent sculpt here. And yeah, this is already pretty good. We're already pretty much most of the way there. And let's say, you know, let's just, you know, maybe you did something while you were sculpting, and your you know, your heel's a little bit like twisted now, or it's bending like you see here. So this is actually not too hard to fix as long as like your mesh is kind of high poly enough. You'll find the sort of mixed bag, or as long as kind of like the geometry is even enough. Really, it's not necessarily like how like polygon dense it is, or vertex dense it is, but sort of like how clean the topology is. So as long as that's pretty good, and I think these have pretty, yeah, this is pretty clean, right? This is a nice mesh. So so in this instance, you saw I already kind of twisted it, but if you were doing something like that, and maybe you needed to bring the heel back in line with this upper part, then same kind of thing, you might zoom out a little bit, and it might throw off your sculpt on like this side, right? So that's just going to happen. It's just kind of part of like correcting the mesh. But you might grab here, you might start to twist this outward, then you might go up to the middle point of the heel and start to pull that back in. Then you might grab the bottom part again, pull that out, bring this in again. Maybe you need to zoom in a little bit closer because now it's starting to kink, or there's still a little curve maybe here. And you just kind of zoom in, you're going to grab that point, maybe you zoom out again, pull that back over, and you're just going to kind of keep correcting the shape of the heel until it's kind of pretty much straight again. And the same kind of idea if maybe you, you know, maybe now you've also got maybe it didn't only knock this side out of line, but maybe you've got a little curve here, and maybe you just need to kind of bring that in, bring the heel down, and just kind of straighten that line out. And now you've kind of realigned the heel a little bit. So it's pretty good. I think that pretty much covers the idea, right? So the last thing that I want to show you, because this is some pretty cool stuff and you can do some really fun things, and it also kind of goes in line with sculpting because you will have to sculpt this to still get the finished shape, but this is really cool. So this, I've already got a little kind of chain link that I made here, so you can do something like this very easily. Essentially what you want to do is you can have multiple jewelry pieces. Like you could have a sort of horizontal link here, you could put a heart or a stud or something like that, and then make your vertical chain here. But as long as you've kind of got one horizontal piece and a vertical loop piece, you can turn this into a full-size chain. Now this specific geometry I would not recommend using for like big jewelry pieces, because you can see even these rings are like super dense, and this is gonna, like, if you make a bracelet out of this kind of jewelry, you're gonna probably get like hundreds of thousands of vertexes for like a bracelet, right? And that's kind of absurd. You don't want that. You're gonna cause frame rate issues, and it's not ideal. It's not ideal. You'd want ideally to get some kind of low poly ring mesh, or just make your own by taking like a cylinder, cutting the top faces off so that it's hollow, adding a solidify modifier, and then maybe subdividing it a couple times so that it turns into like a round shape. But this is not good geometry for making like small bracelet pieces, but this is just for like example, right? I just wanted to kind of add that as a disclaimer because it is kind of important if you end up making jewelry like this and then you put it in game and you're like, man, I made this jewelry and my game is running at like 10 frames per second, and it's probably because you made like one bracelet that has literally like a million vertex points in it, right? And it's slowing your game down. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, aside from that, the idea behind this structure is just like I said, you have this one vertical piece, or sorry, a horizontal piece, and you have one vertical link. And with this, it will create a pretty much like a perfect chain. And so I've already got what I've got here. These are curves. So you can go to add and go to curve, and these are circles. And there's also Bezier curves, which are actually like straight kind of angles, basically. Um, you can use these to also, create a chain along this curve. But, if you're doing like an ankle bracelet or something like that, like I have here, you might just want a circle. And so this will start like perfectly round, large circle, and then you can just kind of stretch it. And I like to kind of get like a general shape here, right? It's not going to be perfect, but we just need kind of the shape of her ankle. And I've already got this little chain here, so what I'm going to do, I want to keep this as like a template piece, right? So I'm going to Shift D and duplicate the piece, and then we're going to snap it to the cursor, and we're going to Control A and apply all transforms so that we have applied it to, this specific area in the world origin. Now we can highlight this mesh. We're going to go to modifiers over here. We're going to add an array modifier, and we're going to change the shape to a curve. So you might see it kind of disappear there for a second, but that's okay. We're going to see there's a curve object. Grab your little dropper, and we're going to grab this curve. And bam, now you see you've got a couple of these little links already scattered around here. In this align rotation, maybe they were a little bit, maybe they spawned in like this. You might need to flip them on the x-axis or maybe on the z-axis or something like that, depending on your mesh. It can go a little bit out of line sometimes, so this will help you get it back in rotation. You just maybe have to mess with these values a couple times until it looks like it's supposed to, right? And now at this point, all we're going to do is just increase this count number until it kind of starts to wrap around like a little chain. And now you've got a little chain bracelet or something like that. And the same kind of idea applies to her arms, right? You would just create a circle. Maybe you create a circle right here going around her wrist. Same kind of idea. Create your array modifier, change it to a curve, and then apply the dropper to the curve or circle that's on her arm instead of the curve that's on her ankle here. So it's all the same idea. You can draw a circle around her waist here. You could make a belt. You could make a chain belt, or waistline jewelry or things like that. Same kind of idea. It's very versatile. So now that we've got this, we've got a pretty good general shape, right? It's not perfect, but we're not going for perfection. And then we're going to apply the modifiers. So right now, what's pretty much, even though it looks like you've got a ring here, it hasn't actually created like a bracelet. If you're like, see how you're not actually able to view the amount of you're not seeing the actual geometry here in edit mode. It's because we haven't applied anything yet. So you're sort of seeing like a preview of what it's going to look like before the modifier is applied. So you're going to, we're going to go back to object mode, and we're going to apply the modifier now. And now that we've applied it, we've actually created this object, and we've got what we can actually work with now. So this has, after applying, this has become the actual mesh that we can go into sculpt mode, and now we can actually start to sculpt this little bracelet so that it kind of fits her ankles a little bit roughly. And like I said, I'm not gonna make it perfect. Things like this are actually a little bit better with some gap, actually, because they'll layer better with maybe tight leggings or stuff like that. That's actually why I have these leggings in here for doing like jewelry and shoes, or these little bracelets here, um, because a lot of times, you're probably gonna have like pants or something on, so you want these to fit around those items and not clip with them. So yeah, so this is pretty good. Not a whole lot to do here. The ankle is not a complex area to sculpt, and when you're doing bracelets and stuff, you're not really sculpting perfectly unless it's maybe like a really tight piece, like this kind of almost choker-like piece, right? Where maybe you do want it to be a little bit more skin tight or accurate to the curvature. But other than that, that's really it. What are we at right now? About an hour. Okay. I think that's a pretty good tutorial. I could go over things like jewelry, what I have here. Maybe I can just cover that real quick for you guys, just because it's kind of related. This applies a little bit more to like adding physics to an object in Unreal Engine. That'll be a different video, but maybe I can use these earrings as a reference in the future. But these are some earrings that I made, and basically these are actually hand aligned. I did not use like a curve or anything like that to create this little chain. These are actually just placed by hand, um, just rotated. I took like one little ring, put it there, took another little ring, or I duplicated this one, moved it down, shrinked it a little bit, that kind of idea. And then this Jodi text was created by, you can do Shift A to bring up this menu, or sorry, actually maybe it's Control, oh no, we're in edit mode, my bad. So now in object mode, you can do Shift A, you can create a text object, we can go into edit mode, type Jodi, go back into object mode, and then we can turn this into a mesh. What we can do is add a solidify, so now this won't be like a flat plane, it'll actually have some depth to it. We can apply that, and now you've actually got like a 3D text object, um, that you can add to like a bracelet or something like that. That's pretty much what I did here. I created some text, added a solidifier so it has a little bit of depth, and then you can use the shrink wrap modifier to make sure that the text is sort of wrapping around the object instead of sitting kind of flat and floating out of place and stuff, right? So shrink wrap is going to help that text follow the curve there. And that's pretty much what I did there. Um, but yeah, so these earrings, these flat planes. These are a proxy mesh that is used in Unreal Engine to apply physics, because you can see that there's a lot of vertexes here. There's a lot of edges here. This is a pretty like dense mesh for something as small as jewelry. It's probably not the best thing, but considering that it's relatively small and there's not a whole lot of chain links and stuff here, it's not too demanding. But you wouldn't want to try and simulate physics on this entire, like on the geometry itself here. We create these planes that are kind of in the rough shape of the earring itself at a couple subdivision points, um, for like kind of hinge points in the physics. So these lines, these edges here, are going to be where the mesh is going to kind of bend and swing. It's gonna hinge at these points when the physics are simulated. Um, so that's kind of the idea behind this. So you create this plane that kind of overlaps. It's kind of cutting directly down the middle of this mesh. I make a couple hinge anchor points, and then when you export these all together, you'll be able to apply physics just to this low, very, very low poly proxy mesh, but it will simulate physics on the actual detailed earring mesh, um, without trying to simulate physics on like 100,000 vertex points. It's simulating physics on like 8, right? So it's a huge difference. It's a way to save performance while still getting um, kind of accurate simulation. But that's pretty much the idea behind these earrings. I can go over that in another video and show you guys how to actually do physics. I'm also definitely not a master at physics. Doing stuff like these earrings is a really good way to just kind of get familiar with the system, period. But once you start getting into something like a jacket that has flowing sleeves, or maybe like a jacket that's a little bit open and loose, and you want to have the bottom part of the jacket swing a little bit while the top stays static, that's where things start to get a little bit complicated. It's not impossible, but you're going to be doing a lot more kind of detailed work to shape like collision around the relative shape of her body, and that's where things kind of start to get tricky. So not impossible by any means, right? But doing little things like this is just a good way to kind of get introduced to the systems, right? And for the most part, I think that kind of covers everything that I wanted to show you guys today. I hope that this was useful and you learned a couple good things. Of course, this is for Jodi from the Killing Antidote, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do here. Killing Antidote is a really cool game, and you can pretty much it's very versatile. If you can create it and you can fit it to her and you can weight paint it, you can pretty much add just about anything to this game. So it's really really cool. It gives you a lot of options. You can actually be like extremely creative, which is really cool. And so yeah, I hope that this helped. Maybe this will give you some guidance on doing your own first T-shirt or something like that, or maybe you want to do a wristband, stuff like that. It's a good way to just start practicing, just start making things. Like I said, I'm not an expert at this. It's always good to reference multiple sources, but this is just kind of some of the workflows I use, some things that work for me, and some things that I've actually used myself to create things for my clothing mods. So hopefully this will be useful for other people, and maybe some other people will come up with some really cool jewelry or things like that to create. So yeah, so hopefully this was helpful. If you guys want to join the Discord and talk to us and all of our other creators and modders, I'll drop the link in the description so you can see that. And yeah, definitely check out TKA. It's a fun game. The Killing Antidote. It's a small little developer team indie game, but they're doing some good work. It's a cool game. So, anyways, thanks for watching, and see you next time.